We've seen quarantine checkpoints in plenty of zombie games and movies, but what if you were the one who had to decide who lives and who dies? Hey people, Voice talking to you, and today we're taking a look at Quarantine Zone, the last check. In this zombie border control sim, we take control of one of the last checkpoints between the survivors and the hordes of the infected. If you'd like to check this game out for yourself or see my full playthrough stream, there are links to both down in the description. We are an unnamed commander airlifted to a quarantine checkpoint in what looks to be New York City. Without much of a story here, it's not easy to tell whether the rest of the world is already in shambles. It could be that this quarantine has the zombie outbreak contained, and it's our job to keep it in. But it seems more likely to me that we serve as the last line of defense between helpless refugees and the hordes of zombies. Regardless of the fate of the rest of the world, our priority is the security of the checkpoint and the safety of the survivors we deem fit for evacuation. There's a lot involved in keeping our operation secure and functional, but let's start with the most obvious and the most interesting: checking survivors. The gameplay here is going to follow a pretty similar pattern to something like Papers, Please or Contraband Police. Each day, a new group of survivors will approach our checkpoint, hoping to reach the safe zones. Our primary job is to search them for signs of infection and decide what to do with them. Depending on what we find, we can admit them to the survivor block, lock them in quarantine, or liquidate them. When it comes down to it, this is just as dark as it sounds. Survivors will beg for their lives, lie about their symptoms, and occasionally berate you for just being a horrible person. Thing is, sometimes they do mention a bite that I haven't even seen yet, so some of the dialogue gives away their symptoms. And this can be a good thing, but sometimes it makes it a bit too obvious, so they may want to decrease how often survivors do that. Not all symptoms are clear-cut infection, however. Sure, once in a while you'll get someone with an obvious bite on their arm. You got bitten multiple times? Who let this man in here? Or, they'll walk in looking like dollar store Shrek. That's an alien you've put in front of me. I'm sorry to tell you guys this, but that's not a human. But more often than not, they have less distinct symptoms, such as coughing, scratches, or bloodshot eyes. There's an in-depth medical description for most of these symptoms with helpful pictures, all available in our handy tablet for viewing and marking. I will admit I was a bit confused to find that correctly marking a survivor's symptoms doesn't increase our payout at all. Even if the bonuses are minor, I feel like that should be an obvious add, especially since it seems that there isn't a time limit on dealing with each day's survivors. Anyway, we have access to several high-tech tools to help us do our job. The most useful of these tools is an X-ray scanner that lets us see through clothing to look for bites and other concealed symptoms like pustules or necrosis. Don't worry, nobody seems to be going commando in the zombie apocalypse, though I do question their choice of shorts and t-shirts. When combined with a blacklight, stethoscope, and thermopulsometer, we can get a full read on each survivor's health. Eventually, they'll also begin bringing their belongings into the queue with them. We'll need to sniff out and confiscate any contraband like weapons or zombie body parts. Why? Why would you bring that?
Come on, just let me keep it.
No! I have no clue why they would think bringing infected limbs into a checkpoint would be a good idea, but any contact with these parts or any infected blood found on their belongings is a clear sign of infection. Plus, we can occasionally find a survivor with golden weapons or other objects that we can confiscate and add to our little side collection. At the end of all this searching, though, we still have a choice to make. If we send them to the survivor block, they'll be placed with the rest of our survivors, meaning we'll be responsible for keeping them fed, sheltered, and alive until the next evacuation convoy arrives, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. If they show minor symptoms or we aren't sure about their condition, we can place survivors in quarantine to be held overnight. Unfortunately, we can't afford to isolate quarantine survivors from one another, so if one is severely infected and left overnight, they could turn and kill everyone else in quarantine. If everyone survives the night, we can check on them again in the morning to see if their symptoms have worsened or improved. Then we can either place them back in quarantine or make a final decision about their fate. Now, if we believe a survivor is infected, then the only clear choice is to have them liquidated, which is a nice way of saying that we can send them out back to be shot. Eventually, when the virus begins to cause aggression, we'll be given a pistol of our own for self-defense. This also gives us the ability to shoot survivors that try to attack us, or even execute infected right there in front of everyone else in line. Anyways, would you look into the camera for me? Choosing to do this seems to have no negative effects and actually saves you the pain of dealing with an angry infected if you send them to quarantine or liquidation. I feel like painting the fence with someone's brain matter in full view of everyone who came to you for safety should have some sort of drawback if they aren't attacking you. Maybe some of the survivors in line will turn and run, ruining the chance for payout. Maybe it could have some sort of story impact, or if we don't want to be interesting, it could just be a fine. But for now, the next person in line will just calmly walk in and stand over the body while they wait to be inspected. Now, each survivor we extract and each infected we put down earns us money. We can spend our earnings on supplies, defenses, and upgrades. As I mentioned, there's an element of base building to our checkpoint. Each survivor requires food, a bed, and if they're sick, medicine each day. If we don't feed or house a survivor properly, they could get sick or die. Our base can be expanded with new buildings, and existing buildings can be upgraded to increase their capacity. Base building is pretty linear though, with preset slots for each buildable structure. I mean, it's all just tents anyways, so I guess we shouldn't be looking too much into customization and accessories. That said, each tent requires power to function. Not the rest of the checkpoint though. That'll all be fine, I'm sure. That means more buildings require more generators to power and more fuel to keep those gens running. Every day, we are responsible for carting and distributing supplies to the survivor block. Don't ask me why we have to do everything around here. The guys in the hazmat suits are just abysmally lazy, apparently. Which, I mean, I guess that explains why they sent us to fix this place. Regardless, the delivery system feels unnecessary and kind of tedious when compared to everything else. I like the option of managing supplies, don't get me wrong, but it definitely needs a rework. Anyway, keeping the survivor block supplied will cost us money for supplies and maintenance. So the more survivors we keep and the longer we hold them, the more they will cost us. There's also a limited amount of room in both the block and the quarantine cell, so liquidating potentially healthy survivors or placing risky cases in quarantine may become necessary to stay within your budget. I'm actually looking forward to these difficulties because the demo was just a bit too easy. The last major mechanic this title gives us is defense. Every now and then, a massive horde of infected will attack our checkpoint, and we, as always, are solely responsible for defending it. Fortunately, we have access to an impossibly armed drone carrying the firepower of an AC-130 gunship. Actually, this entire system reminds me immensely of an old mobile game called Zombie Gunship, if anyone remembers that one. This drone can move freely around the street in front of our wall and use various weapons such as a minigun, high explosive cannons, and even special abilities like bombs, airstrikes, and lure traps to wipe out hundreds of infected charging towards our walls. If they manage to break through, it's game over, I assume. We also use this drone whenever an evacuation convoy is sent out. After carefully choosing which survivors to extract and sorting them into the proper trucks, the convoy is dispatched under the cover of darkness to take them out of the city. During this daring escape, our drone will follow a vomit-inducing path along their route to keep us in line with the vehicles. Our job is to keep the infected off their tail and protect them during events like engine failure. Considering we're only evacuating like 2 or 3 people at a time, I don't know why we stick to trucks instead of using air transport, but whatever, I don't really care about the specifics of this one because the sequence itself is really cool. I do wish there was a more precise way to switch between weapons, and the lack of any kind of special infected makes the fight pretty one-sided. That said, if they make the combat a bit more dynamic and smooth out the movement for the drone, this could be a really fun addition to the gameplay loop. Since we're talking about what needs to be fixed up, let's go back to the heart and soul of this game, the checkpoint. I'll admit that I slipped up several times early on, and even let a survivor with a bite into the block. The next day, all I got was a fine, and then they were taken care of. If the player makes a mistake that severe, there should be severe consequences. I should be able to walk into the survivor block and find all of my survivors torn apart or infected if I make that kind of mistake. The kind of desperation and anxiety that should come from this sort of high-stakes position isn't quite here yet. Sure, it feels bad to find your quarantine full of zombies the next morning, but then you just pull a lever and it all gets washed away. Whether the devs have us fight the infected survivors ourselves or just show us the aftermath, there needs to be more consequences for mistakes. There was also almost no story in this game whatsoever. I can respect the concept of the game as a simple simulator, but focusing solely on running the last checkpoint in a zombie apocalypse like it's a supermarket, just earning money and getting bigger, feels like a huge waste of this concept's potential. Including an overarching narrative or at least small sub-stories from individuals or groups of survivors would not only make each day more exciting, it would make the game more replayable as a whole. My biggest issue with this game right now is that our choices don't have any meaning in the grand scheme of things. Plus, the defense and base management mechanics are cool, but they feel a bit tacked on in terms of actual gameplay. Fortunately, this is just a demo, and there's plenty of room for the developers to expand and improve on their idea. And I really hope they do, because this is a really awesome concept with incredible potential that I'd love to see reach the same heights as something like Papers, Please. But anyways, I'm just the voice in your head, so what do you think about Quarantine Zone? Do you like the addition of base building and defense, or would you rather the focus stay on the checkpoint? Are you interested in an interactive story, or are you happy with just a simulator game? What changes would you like to see in the finished version? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, leaving a like or a comment helps me out a ton, and means I don't have to liquidate you. If you want more, subscribing is the best way to support the channel and keep new content coming your way, because I put out new stuff every week. Thanks so much for listening to me today, and you'll be hearing from me again real soon. Killing an infected plus $900. I got $900 for killing that guy. Hell yeah. What a great job I have.